It was a really good night for Donald Trump last night with his speech to the joint session of Congress, and it wasn't a very good night for the media. See, the media only know how to tear down. They only know how to criticize. They only know how to disparage. And so when President Trump is telling a good, positive story, well, that brings out the worst in the media. We've got Exhibit A for you here first. This was the great story of this little boy, DJ Daniels, a 13-year-old who is suffering from brain cancer. And I'm sure you remember this moment when the president basically deputized him as a Secret Service agent, because he's gone all around the country trying to collect badges and sort of be an honorary member of law enforcement. Well, you don't get any bigger law enforcement than Secret Service. And so watch this moment.
And tonight, DJ, we're going to do you the biggest honor of them all. I am asking our new Secret Service Director, Sean Curran, to officially make you an agent of the United States Secret Service.
That face is amazing. That surprise and that face and that joy and his dad and everything. It's great. It's what makes humanity the amazing emotional experience that we get to live, right? As we share this roller coaster ride that is life on planet Earth that God has graced us with. Who can see that and not set politics aside? Well, this is Nicole Wallace. Nicole Wallace is a commentator and host for MSNBC. I guess she thinks it's her job to even take a story like this and find some way to attack Donald Trump. And while she tells her story that you're about to hear here, her perspective, her hot take on this little 13-year-old boy, I guess she thinks she's being smart and profound, but she's really just sort of crapping all over this boy and his dreams and using him as some sort of political prop for her own agenda and for her own purposes. But it goes terribly, terribly wrong.
But I think this was a lesson in finding one thing that you let yourself feel. And I let myself feel joy about DJ. And I hope he's alive for another, 95 years, right? And I hope he lives and the life he wants to live. He wants to be a cop. He knows what he wants to do. And maybe when you have childhood cancer, that crystallizes for you. And I hope he has a long life as a law enforcement officer. But I hope he never has to defend the United States Capitol against Donald Trump supporters. And if he does, I hope he isn't one of the 6 who loses his life to suicide. And I hope he isn't one who has to testify against the people who carried out acts of seditious conspiracy and then live to see Donald Trump pardon those people. But I think this was...
basically tantamount to saying, yeah, really great. Happy for you that you're surviving brain cancer. Hope you live a long life. Sure would be a shame if you have to commit suicide. Who does this? Who brings themselves to the point where they are making this kind of political observation? Is this smart? Is this in some way intellectual? Kevin McMahon, producer of this show, I need you to have my back on this one. I am in the same business as Nicole Wallace. I don't work for the Peacock Network. I don't have a big set. Nicole, think about this. They just had a round of layoffs and firings at NBC News. They fired Joy Reid, right? And a couple of other primetime hosts. The Alex Wagner also got fired. Nicole Wallace is one of the ones they saved. The executives at MSNBC took a look at the landscape and said, yeah, we got to fire Joy and we got to fire Alex, but Nicole Wallace is one of the good ones. Let's keep her because her commentary is necessary. Her analysis is what we want. There you go. That's what passes as the winning formula at MSNBC. I'm in the same business as her. I make political observations. Sometimes they're biting. Sometimes they're critical of people that I disagree with. Kevin, if you ever find me reaching the point where I'm using a 13-year-old boy, a 13-year-old cancer survivor, as a political weapon against somebody I disagree with, could you just cut the feed and tell me that I've had enough, I'm done, that it's time for me to find another job? Do you promise me that you'll do that for me, Kevin?
Yeah, I'll fire you. Don't worry.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it. Actually, I don't know if you have the power to fire me.
Want to find out?
And by the way, that clip is making the rounds, obviously, for all the right reasons. I checked before we went on the air. So far, MSNBC has not made any kind of announcement about Nicole Wallace's future, but I cannot imagine that she will go on the air tonight without saying something, if they allow her on the air. But just so you know, she wasn't done. That wasn't the extent of it. She continued to use this little boy, this cancer survivor, for her own political purposes. You didn't see this one, but you're going to see it now.
Let's just stick with DJ. I mean, I think that if there was a moment where your whole body could relax and you could celebrate someone, it was the 13-year-old cancer survivor who would like to be a police officer. It was a genuinely beautiful moment, in the moment that probably was most familiar to the State of the Union addresses we were both a part of. Problem is, in the beauty of that child is the tragedy of the Trump presidency, because we don't know how he survived pediatric cancer, but it is likely he benefited from some sort of cancer research. And it is a fact that Trump has slashed cancer research. It's a fact. By eliminating NIH and by all the cuts, pediatric cancer trials are halted. And you know, God willing, he won't need any more treatment. But if he does, I hope that NIH wasn't responsible for anything that let him live this long.
There you go. This little boy, you know, hopefully he doesn't have cancer, but if he still does, and if he dies, it's Trump's fault. What a ghoul. What an absolute ghoul. And just so you know, it's not just her over at MSNBC, the grande dame of them all, the big wig. She's the you know, anchor tenant in the mall that is MSNBC, Rachel Maddow. She had the same hot take.
If you're going to talk about like being mad at his staff, like, I don't know if we're allowed to do that, but like to let him get to that part of the speech without telling him how to pronounce Uganda. You know what I mean? Right? Like, he's speaking into a microphone. They know it's coming. They know he doesn't know how to say the word. And then he gets up there and he's like sounding his way through it. Like he's hooked on phonics. I mean, he's the president of the United States, and it's just humiliating to him if he was capable of shit.
Wow. So, you know, honestly, if that's all you've got, it's just, you might as well just close up tonight. You know, we don't have any much more analysis because he didn't properly pronounce Uganda the way we think it should be pronounced. Although credit where credit's due, Rachel Maddow is in fact acknowledging that Donald Trump is president of the United States. That's something that she was reluctant to do for quite some time. And good on MSNBC for actually showing a speech by Donald Trump. Remember, for a while there, they refused to show his speeches because, you know, he might lie or say something dangerous and viewers couldn't handle it. Here's another great moment from Maddow's analysis.
I think one of the things that people just can't grasp is the king idea, right? The king idea is not just the unitary presidency, right? It's not just about consolidating power over the executive branch. The idea of a king, which is what you had on your back of your shirt, is that you've got a unitary power, that the Congress is decorative or beside the point, or could be abolished and nothing would happen. That the courts are decorative. The courts are there to essentially ratify what the ruler wants to do, and that the rule of law is really just the rule of the ruler, and the law can be dressed up to occasion whatever it is he wants. Is that the scale of threat to this country that you think we are literally up against, or is this a hyperbolic charge?
Can I just tell you, as a professional broadcaster, I have a radio show in Washington, D.C. every morning for 4 hours. Check it out. It's called O'Connor and Company. And of course, this gig that I've got here doing a live stream show, I interview people. It's part of my job. When you ask a 47-second question of a congressman that is that elaborate and that detailed, and that it tells me two things. First of all, you don't really want to interview this person. You just want to give a monologue and have this person, a congressman, affirm what you said. Right. And secondly, you're asking the question in the detailed, very specific monologue way that you did because you don't trust your guest to actually deliver the kind of information that you're hoping for. So you just want to say it for him. That's a little trick that interviewers do. And that's what Rachel Maddow just achieved. By the way, just real fast, I'll prove my point. Listen to the very end of the question, because she's saying this thing. And then she says to the guest, isn't that right? Don't you agree with me? That's not a question.
To occasion whatever it is he wants. Is that the scale of threat to this country that you think we are literally up against, or is this a hyperbolic charge?
That's right. That's good. Good on you, Rachel Maddow. There's nothing like news and analysis from MSNBC. But you know what? Honestly, MSNBC is the low-hanging fruit. It's the easy stuff. We know who they are. They don't pretend to be anything else. What about over on CNN, where they still try to pretend that they have this myth of objectivity used as a camouflage to really show their political agenda? It's the ones who pretend they're objective that are the real dangerous ones. The ones who pretend like they're not Fox or MSNBC. No, we're just right down the middle. They're the worst. But thank God they've got Scott Jennings to call them out on it.
More efficient. But what Musk is doing seems much more indiscriminate. And I think that that's what people,
Yeah. And guess what? Republicans love it. And I will just say, I think the Democrats.
Guess what? The country's bigger than just Republicans.
I know. Well, he's got over a 50% approval rating, and your party's got 21%. So he's doing okay. I think dying on this hill of defending every single federal worker, that the idea that we can't ever shrink the size of government because this sob story or that sob story, that is not going to play with the American people. Democrats gave no care whatsoever to the 10,000 people who lost their jobs when the big pipeline was canceled by Joe Biden, or the people who lost their businesses in the COVID shutdowns that went on and on and on, or the firefighters or the military that lost their jobs because they wouldn't get the COVID vaccine. No care for that. But care for government workers.
I don't want to have a part. You can take this on another show. I don't want to have a partisan debate about it, but we should note that there were 16 million jobs created when Biden was president, and jobs were lost when Trump was president.
Okay.
So,
and you know how dishonest that is because of what happened at the end of COVID and the restoration.
Even
of
during the period before COVID, there was, there was more.
Good for Jennings, though, to be. You are so. I love that Jennings actually says to actually, that is so dishonest. That's a nice way of saying you're a liar. You're a lying sack. But they continued. It went back and forth.
You can't spend some of these social issues at the supermarket. You can't spend them at the gas station. You can't pay your mortgage with them or your rent. And at some point, you got to stop blaming Joe Biden, and you're going to be accountable. And, he must have met Biden a dozen times in his speech.
I mean, the X, I love you. You guys were blaming George W. Bush in year 8 of the Obama presidency.
But you know something, Scott? We learned something from that. We learned something from that.
He's been in office for 40-something days. I am hearing a lot of cope. These social issues, you know why he talks about them? Because they work. They're like 80-20 issues, and he's on the right side of them, and Democrats are on the wrong side of them. It worked in the campaign, and nobody... Oh, he's not talking about the right things. It worked in the inaugural. It's working in the executive orders. It's why he put it in the speech tonight. And on immigration, you're exactly right. It's his number one achievement so far. The border's effectively closed. The line of the night was they kept saying we need new legislation to secure the border, but it turns out all we really needed was a new president. Without question, in my mind, top scoring line.
That's true. That was the line of the night, and it was a great line of the night. And it called, by the way, those people at that network out on the lie that they perpetuated. Oh, we can't close the border now because we need a comprehensive bipartisan immigration bill. And Trump said, no, don't pass that bill. Just let me be president and I'll fix the problem literally overnight. Axelrod tried to make this case. It's like, oh, sure. You're doing all these divisive social issues. They're not divisive, by the way. They're 80% of Americans believe that a illegal immigrant who commits a crime should be deported. 80% of Americans believe that biological men should not play in sports and, by the way, invade the private spaces like bathrooms and locker rooms of our young girls. Imagine being the father of a 14-year-old girl, knowing that the Democrats want to institute a policy in your school system so that your 14-year-old daughter will see a naked biological man's genitalia for the first time in her locker room against her consent. And the Democrats tell you to shut your mouth. These are 80-20 issues across the board. And actually it's like, well, yeah, you talk about those all the time, but at some point you've got to, get the price of eggs down. It's funny. Why are you conservatives just talking about these issues all the time? These policies did not just show up overnight. You guys have had this agenda too. The difference is you didn't talk about them. You just enacted these policies. And we all wake up suddenly and recognize and say, wait a second, why are you letting boys into the girls' room? Why are girls losing a track meet to a dude who is now representing himself as a woman? Why are we letting millions of people in this country unvetted and they're committing crimes and we're not deporting them? It just happens. And then we're criticized because we start speaking out against it? Oh no, they never talked about it. Because if they did, if they campaigned and said, hey, elect me, and these are the things I'm going to do, they would never win. They just get into power and then they do it. And we actually ask the voters, we ask the American people, is this what you want? Because I don't think this is what you want. And then Democrats like Axelrod is like, oh, all you're doing is talking about divisive cultural issues. Well, yeah, we're talking about the things that you did without asking our permission. Amazing. Thank God Jennings is there, though. He's the only guy on CNN, as we know, a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm sure she's a very nice person. None of this will be remembered because this was a horrific night for the opposition party, regardless of how well she just spoke. It started out with Al Green getting thrown off the House floor because he couldn't keep his emotions under control. Then they had the ridiculous paddles, which now social media is roasting.
That you said false on one side and
ridiculous.
Elon on
and
the
then
other.
finally, and maybe most terribly, the Democrats who couldn't find it in their heart to stand for objectively good things, including the 95-year-old mother and Mark Fogel and Mark, who got rescued from a Russian prison, and they couldn't even stand up for that. I thought Democrats came into this speech lost and defeated by Donald Trump, and today it looks to me like they're even more lost and even more defeated than when this speech started.
All right. Now, as I told you, the real danger of CNN are the reporters and anchors and hosts who pretend to be objective, pretend to be unbiased. See, that's Scott Jennings sitting on a panel with opinionated people, all sharing their opinions. It's still odious because he's 1 against 8, the single man against the machine. But the real issue here, the real takeaway with the media reaction last night to this speech, well, let's go to our favorite, Jake Tapper. He's the most odious of them all, who pretend to be unbiased, who pretend to be objective. What was Jake's objective, facts only, journalistic description of the speech from Donald Trump last night, which, by the way, if I can remind you, the American people approved of by 76%. So 76% of the people who were watching that speech thought it was great. So let's go to Jake Tapper, the objective CNN journalist, to tell us the truth about that speech.
Never heard a president attack the opposition in a speech like this in such a pointed way, even going after to use a rather derisive nickname for Senator Elizabeth Warren.
right, who reacted with smiles and clapping. Basically, she wasn't going to give him that moment. Look,
Yeah, there you go. Dana Bash and Jake Tapper. I've never seen anything so divisive, so pointed, so partisan. Did you sleep through the Obama era? Do you not remember when Barack Obama actually picked a fight, not with Democrats, with a Supreme Court justice over the Citizens United? Look it up. I'm sorry if you're so young or didn't follow the news, Jake, that you don't know that that happened, but I know that you're about my age, maybe a little older. Barack Obama literally called out a Supreme Court justice sitting in front of him during his State of the Union speech. And the Supreme Court justices, by definition, are not allowed to, they're not allowed to show any kind of reaction. They're supposed to be, they really are impartial, at least in that setting. And please, I've never seen anything so partisan and so divisive. Look at Joe Biden's speeches. I mean, I know they were incoherent and you probably slept through them because he's such a complete and total bore. But I assure you, we've seen partisan, divisive speeches before. The only reason this was divisive, though, was because you, Jake, and you, Dana, you, Nicole, you, Rachel, all you members of the media, and all your pals over there on the left side of the house, they refused to actually find it in their hearts to celebrate and applaud objectively wonderful things. It wasn't divisive. You decided to divide.